Hey guys, good afternoon. Pleasure. Thanks for coming. Appreciate it. My name is Dennis O'Connell. I'm the president of the ERC-3643 Association, and I have my very good friend Joachim. Joachim, do you want to introduce yourself real quick?
Nice to see everyone. So yes, I'm Joachim. I'm the Chief Blockchain Officer at Tokeny, and I'm also the one who created at the very early stage the ERC-3643 and still maintaining it until today. So yeah, nice to be here to explain to you what it is.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Joachim. So this is great. I'm glad you guys all showed up. We're really excited. Just a quick show of hands. How many saw our news yesterday? Oh, okay. So this is good. So you may have seen a announcement. I'll show it later. That with Chainlink and Apex, we announced a fully Oracle-enabled token standard called the ACE, and we're working with some of the largest institutions in the world to adapt it. So we'll go into that, but we had some big news, which is great. Today we're going to talk about the ERC-3643 standard in the context of regulatory requirements and market reality. And we'll get into some stuff. By the way, you guys are here making history with us. This is our first ever ETHCC presentation, despite being here. And I have to give a huge shout out to Vivek and the Etherealize team and James at the Ethereum Foundation for welcoming us into Ethereum finally. It's been far too long. So yeah, despite our modest presentation today, we've actually been quite busy. The standard and the association, the nonprofit association, which we'll talk about today, has been quite active. Myself, I've had a long-time career in TradFi. Joachim has had a long-time career in advanced engineering and smart contracts. And the standard we built together has taken on notice, and we'll talk about a little bit of each of this. But we're a Luxembourg nonprofit, so our membership is free, and we have been doing anything from meeting with different regulators around the world, working with law firms to understand securities laws. We have almost all the L2s and Ethereum and the Ethereum Enterprise Alliance as members. We have a plethora of custody platforms, and of course we've had many public pilots, many of them joining, that really are doing a lot with the standard behind the scenes, which is really, really exciting. In fact, of this bottom row here, Apex, Invesco, ABN AMRO, Deloitte, and DTCC are all named public members. And the other ones are involved in pilots, which is great. So as mentioned, we already have 100 institutional members, and we'll be growing even more beyond just institutionals, which we'll talk about at the end. And generally, we bring together, I would say, 5 different groups of participants, whether it's licensed financial institutions, blockchain Web3 providers, tokenization platforms, global law firms, and of course, consultancies. So you're probably wondering, well, what are they all doing? Well, the token standard has had quite the adoption. In fact, we have analytics dashboard. I'll have a few QR codes throughout the talk, so feel free to peruse them. If you're on your phone looking at it, all the better. And we're working on even more dashboard analytics to capture all 35 billion of our assets on public and private chains. Majority of them, a lot of people ask, real estate is a big one, private funds is a big one. We are not appropriate for stablecoins, and we'll get into why that is. But really, we shine whenever you need some sort of compliance or some sort of control on top of the token. As mentioned, we've done a lot of regulatory engagement. We're a recognized RWA standard. So what does that mean? It means we've been in the regulatory report. We're in the sandbox. So the regulators outright said 3643 is the preferred token for, let's say, funds, bonds, any sort of asset that requires a compliant control. We'll also get into EIP in a little bit, and of course we have a self-sovereign identity layer called on-chain ID, which itself is pretty popular. The standard itself, so why would you use the 3643? We have ERC 20, 721. Why would we use this standard? Well, the standard like all the other standards, has its place and its functionality. It's not meant to dominate all the other standards, not meant to replace all the other standards. It's meant to do something very specific. And that is really working with RWAs or security RWAs that really require a level of control, a little deep control in terms of the ledger itself. And so this is really appropriate for all sorts of commodities, contracts, that sort of thing. Securities is our bread and butter. You can use it for e-money in the case where you may want to have more advanced functionality. We'll talk about that functionality. And of course, even loyalty programs, so your points, like, you know, if you have your favorite airline, your favorite travel agency, you can use this. And all these circle around the idea that the issuer has control over the ledger and is able to update the record. And so as I talk to you about this, sometimes issuers want the ability to go in and intercede or do things like clawback, pausing the tokens, pausing the account, or whatever. And so sometimes people don't like that because it's not very DeFi or decentralized, and I totally agree. So we say in cases where you have an issuer that has either a requirement to control the integrity of the ledger, they're the ones that need to go in and update it. That's really where this standard comes into play. As I mentioned, EIP is official part of the canon of standards, which is really cool. The team, Joachim, has done a tremendous amount of work. This was before I joined, that they actually put together what's called T-Rex. Some of you guys know our standard by the T-Rex standard, which is a lot more fun, and we'll get into the future of that. But as you can tell, there's a lot of token standards, believe it or not, in Ethereum. But in terms of us, where does 3643 come? Well, it comes from the EIP we were assigned back then. And of course, in December of 23, we reached final status, joining the other canon of major standards, which we're quite proud of. So what is 3643? I've been talking a lot about it. Well, you could think about 3643 as wrapping an ERC-20, and you're wrapping it with a few different things. First of all, you're wrapping it with an identity layer. So your wallet address isn't your primary means of holding the tokens. You have an on-chain ID, and that on-chain ID really does two things. It holds addresses and it holds claims, okay? Then you have what's called registry. And the idea of the registry is these are permission cryptographic claims, and we'll actually show this, that tell whether you're an issuer, a admin, or a token holder, what your permissions are or not. You have a compliance module. So this is for the asset, the rules. If you're trading too much, if you're a certain country code, if you have too much of a diversion of price, whatever your rule is for the asset, it protects the integrity of the asset. And then lastly, we wrap the ERC-20, you know, your favorite functions, you know, transfer from, and we wrap it around an entire compliance process. And so you could do your transfer and transfer from just like you can with any ERC, but a lot more stuff happens behind the scenes. So obviously there's a big gas difference as well, but over 120 different functions. Usually what we say is 3 functions are most important: transfer, force transfer, and recovery. Transfer because it's from a superficial level completely compliant with ERC-20. Of course, a lot of stuff happens below the scenes. We'll talk about that. Then force transfer, which is the most lightning rod of all the functions. That's the ability for the issuer to go in and literally move tokens behind without the investors or token holders' permission. And there's sorts of compliance reasons for that or whatever. So it's important that you know that going into the standard. And of course, recovery, which means if your wallet address is compromised in some sort of way, because you have an on-chain ID, we can flip out the wallet address and migrate all your tokens. So obviously, there's some good and some bad. Okay. So ERC-3643 is really primarily a compliance framework. That's, like I said, our bread and butter. You wouldn't use it for stable coins necessarily. You would really use it for securities or things where the issuer needs to have that control. And in our world, we look at it in 2 ways. A way where the issuer creates the token and sends it to an investor, and then when the token holders, they have the tokens and they trade amongst themselves. And that's really interesting because we can enforce that investors either swap with a certain token pair or certain stablecoin, and we ensure that whichever investor has the correct set of rules or identity and meets all the compliance. So why do we have a tokenization framework? Why the need for a standard? So 1400 was a really great exercise. In fact, 1400 we look at as part of the canon standards, even though there's about about a dozen of them with different implementations, but they're never officially an EIP standard. And so each 1400 is slightly different than the other. The way they do things is slightly different, but still adopted by some very large RWA shops in our space, which is great. But what we see here is that having standards, especially from my background in finance, is really fundamental. In fact, there's all types of standards, not just token standards, that we enjoy every day, that a lot of use. There's standards for cell phones, communication, even the way our credit cards work, all that sort of stuff. And what that does is takes pressure off of participants to stop reinventing bespoke implementations to meet whatever requirements they have. You have these requirements, and again, as I mentioned in the news today, we're continuing to innovate. So just because we're standard doesn't mean we stagnate. What we're trying to do is encourage adoption and growth while also encouraging innovation, which is not always easy. As you can see here, we have a big set of EVM and non-EVM implementations, which we'll get into. And then obviously part of these token protocols are also built on an ecosystem. And there are all types of standards, not just token standards for this. So as mentioned, we're in a lot of institutional adoptions and pilots. Project Spruce out of Singapore was very good, which I mentioned to us. And again, you can look up all these online or whatever. JP Morgan Chase did an emerging technology report on our standard. ABN AMRO issued a green bond, which was great as well, and they've done more since. And Fasanara, as tokenized securities, our standard gives you versus on-chain. How do I have a certainty that they have the permissions? So in the regulated world, it's not just can I do it, but do I have the permission to do what I'm doing at the time I'm doing it? And then most importantly, stopping what we call like the runaway train. Let's say KYC status. How do we revoke KYC status? What if we need to look at and pause the individual investor? What if there was a fraud that occurred and someone's tokens were stolen? Can we bring that back to them? So in cases where we are having actual securities, having the ability to correct your balance is fundamental, actually. Having the ability to lock tokens is fundamental, and have the ability to grandly pause issuers or token holders, excuse me, is also fundamental. And they all look at all this of 3643. They look at the architecture, which we'll talk about in a bit. And I'm happy to say that we're doing even more on the regulatory side to really kind of push the boundary of getting public assets on public blockchains and Ethereum. So we're very happy with that. I'm going to hand it off to Joe.
734 and 735 standard. So 734 is for key management, so it's access control on the identity. 735 is about being a claim holder. So a claim is basically the structure at the smart contract level to hold verifiable credentials. So it has different fields like data field, signature that proves that that claim is certified. And yeah, it's very widely used now, and it's compatible with W3C verifiable standards like verifiable credentials. So yes, next. So that part here, the identity registry, is what the issuer has to keep control over to set what are the rules of eligibility on your tokens. So the issuer will add to the trusted claim issuer registry who are the trusted claim issuers. So it's basically, for example, KYC providers, AML checkers, whatever entity has the authority to issue these verifiable credentials. And every claim issuer is an on-chain identity smart contract itself. So on-chain identities can issue claims and can hold claims. The other one is the Trusted Claim Topics Registry. So that one holds the list of claim topics that you need to be eligible on an asset. So for every trusted claim topic in the Claim Topics Registry, you will have a trusted claim issuer that has the authority to issue it, or several trusted claim issuer. It depends if you have one or several. And then you have the identity registry itself, which implements the most important function over this, which is called isVerified. That function is going to check when you make a transfer is if the recipient of the transfer, the wallet that is going to receive the transfer, is linked to an on-chain identity and if that on-chain identity holds the required claims issued by the trusted claim issuers. And it will verify the signature, the cryptographic signature, to make sure that the verifiable credential is valid. So yeah, actually I spoke about that already. So it's let's go on the compliance side. So the compliance smart contract is a bit different. So the identity registry side is about eligibility. So it's about knowing if the investor receiving the tokens is eligible to receive the asset. On the compliance side, it's more about the global offering, like if the transfer itself is compliant. So even if you are eligible to receive the asset, maybe the transfer will not be compliant because several reasons. For example, if you have a Reg D in the US, you have a maximum number of investors in the US. If you already have attained this cap, then you cannot receive tokens even if you are eligible. Or if you have a maximum volume of transaction per day, per month, per investor, and you already achieved that cap, then you cannot make the transfer. So that's about it. And the compliance smart contract is modular. So every single specific rule, I gave 2 examples, but each of these rules is a separate module of compliance, and you can plug these modules to the modular smart contract. So you can really tailor-made your compliance rules depending on the legal requirements that are associated with the asset. So the last point is the security token. So it's an ERC-20 basically, but extended. So you have all the functions of ERC-20 are there. So you can, it's basically interoperable with any DeFi platform that has been built for ERC-20, which is great. But it has also other functions. So the other functions are, Denis spoke about it already, pause, freeze, force transfer, recovery, mint burn, like a lot of different transfer functions which allow to have control over the asset, because these assets are permissioned tokens and you cannot just transfer them freely or do whatever you want with them. It's regulated assets, so it's very important to have this kind of controls over the assets. Yeah, so that's the function transfer. So just to show you, when you make a transfer, instead of having the simple transfer like an ERC-20 where you just look at the balance, and if the balance is enough, you just can do the transfer. Here you are going to check if the address is frozen, if the tokens, like if there is some frozen tokens on the wallet, and if the free balance is enough to transfer. Then you are going to check if the receiver is verified, so if the receiver is eligible to receive the assets. And finally, check if the transfer is compliant with the can transfer function called on the compliance. Yeah, so that's the force transfer. So it works a bit the same, but the difference is that in this case, it's only agent function. So it's the agent of the asset that can call this function and make a transfer between a from and a to address without the consent necessarily of the token holders. So it's a very powerful function which should be used only regarding like the regulation, like it has to be legal to do that. The issuer will not scam you. That's a very important point. These are regulated assets. Agents managing this kind of function have legal liability over what they do. And because the blockchain has a full transparency about everything that happened on the ledger, if a false transfer happen, which is not something that is supported by law, you can just sue the agent. So that's also something that has to be said, because I know that some people freak out about this function, but this function is necessary for regulated assets. Otherwise, the issuer and the agents cannot fulfill their legal requirements. Yeah, so that's another project that we are working on. So Dennis spoke a lot about the ERC-3643 association, which is really a B2B consortium with all the actors which are building on top of ERC-3643. Think about T-Rex network, so that's that initiative that we are creating. Think about it as the B2C arm of the ERC-3643 adventure, let's say. So we are going to create a DAO for governing the ecosystem. And the T-Rex network project is about three things. So first, it's to create a community around the standard, make people understand what it is, and create this mass understanding of what it is and how it can be used. So bring a lot of people to collaborate on the ecosystem, bring people to check what is the code, to make suggestions, to have really this empowerment from the community. The next one is an app store. So we have noticed, because we have been in the space of RWA tokenization for so long, Tokeny is 8 years old now. So we were there before there was even a hype about RWA. No one was speaking about it. But we have seen that it can be very complex for issuers to understand how to issue these assets on-chain, to tokenize real-world assets, especially when they come from TradFi and they have absolutely no ID, so they can get lost very easily with legal counsels who don't know what they speak about, with technical teams who don't know what they do, or everywhere along the way with distributors that are not allowed to manage these tokens or are not aware of how it works. So the idea is really to create this app store with all our partners, mostly from the ERC-3643 association, to provide turnkey solution for issuers to find all the partners that they need. So legal partners who know what they speak about, tokenization solution, technical solution, turnkey, where you just have to give your details about your asset and you have the token that is issued, distributors, network of potential investors for the different assets, and everything that you need around it. And then the last one is an app chain, so that's going to come later on. But as the world is evolving to more and more cross-chain ecosystem with many chains that have to communicate with each other, you have to understand that when you have to work on different chains with this kind of assets, which have this compliance embedded, it's much more complex than simple ERC-20s. ERC-20s, you want to bridge them, you just bridge the balance, and that's it. And then you don't need to take care about what is happening next. But imagine you have an asset which is on 10 blockchains in parallel, and you have a maximum number of investors in a specific country, let's say 1,000 investors. How are you doing that? Like every single transfer has to update all the blockchains in parallel. It's almost impossible. So you need to have a single source of truth to make sure that you are not going to break the rules. And that's why the app chain is there, in collaboration with what we have been announcing just yesterday with Chainlink as well, which is making this coordination possible. So we just launched actually the social medias on T-Rex network like 1 month ago. And in the first 2 weeks, we already gathered 100,000 members on the social media. And if you want to join, this is the QR code. You can scan it and have a look. Thank you.
Thank you, Joachim. That was great. I think we're good for questions. I'm going to leave a QR code up for everyone because, as Joachim mentioned, we're definitely looking to engage the Ethereum community more. As I said, builders, small projects, anyone who wants to get involved, T-Rex is for you. And then if you're an institutional or a large DeFi project, the association is your best bet, and we'll go there. So I see some questions, so we'll get to the questions. I saw you first, so please. And just let me know if it's for me or Joachim.
It's for you,
Okay.
or both of you. I think either can answer this. My question is about on-chain ID and how much the contracts give the ability to like remove that provider. I'm not sure how deeply integrated they are into the T-Rex network, but like if you needed other providers, like if there's competitors, because that one's obviously permission. That's the permission element that makes sense. But if there's other like opinionated, registries that someone might want to use, like how much can you switch out? How deep are they like integrated into the T-Rex network?
I love this question. This is a great question. So thank you for asking. And I mean that because I think it's one of our top questions about on-chain ID. And there's a lot of confusion about how much is on-chain in or out. I think both of us should answer this. So I'll give my side of this question, which is we see a lot of our members actively innovating on-chain ID. Actively, in fact, even the announcement with Chainlink yesterday was towards some of the points you just brought up about creating a oracleized connection to the identity for certain claims or certain cryptographic proving. But in terms of the actual on-chain ID itself related to the token standard or the registry, it really has the two hooks, the 734 and 735 interfaces. And so what we usually tell members is if they want to innovate, maintain that interface, but then you could have different invitations behind the scenes. Joachim, you want to take a shot?
Yeah, of course. So another point that I want to mention about on-chain ID. So on-chain ID is a fully open source smart contract. You can implement it the way you want, as Dennis was mentioning, as long as you respect the interfaces. And we are working more and more with partners, other providers, especially smart account providers, so that they put the claim holder interfaces on top of the smart account. So you could have, for example, with Argent or Biconomy or whatever, you could hold claims there and use it. So you don't need to use the implementation of on-chain ID that we are providing since the start. You can use whatever.
Thank you. Question, go ahead.
Just real quick, what are your plans for engaging with U.S. regulators?
I have already, actually. I didn't mean to laugh because I'm not sure. I think we're recorded, so a big announcement coming up. Let's just say that. Big announcement with 3643 in the SEC and the Crypto Task Force. What I will tell you is last year, I actually did a presentation to the SEC and Chairman Gensler. And at the time, I think we had like 50 or so members, and all the members said, do not mention us, do not talk about us, do not say anything. And I could tell you I was pretty damn nervous. That was in March last year, doing this speech to the SEC. And what frustrated me is they were always very good, but very limited. Now I feel like, it's in America, we have Black Friday, which is, a rush to the door. I can't even get in. If you go on the SEC Crypto Task Force website, they show all the written input. Everyone and their mother are going to the SEC, which is an amazing thing to say. But it's not just the SEC, right? You have the Senate Banking, you have the Executive Task Force, you have the House Services, you have the CFTC Task Force. You have about 5-6 entities now. So it's a very, very different time. Great question. Next questions?
That might be actually related to your answer, but I've been in this space for like 9 years, and we've been observing different attempts at doing tokenized securities for so long with securitize other companies, right? And it all kind of failed. So I'm just genuinely curious. Why do you think this time it's going to be different? What's changed? What is your take about this? We'd like to be optimistic, but why? Since we failed so many times.
Great question again. So for the association, we have 3 major mandates for the members, right? 3 directions of travel that we want for the standard. And one of those mandates is we are very bullish, I think you and I agree on this, of bridging into DeFi. I think that's really the future. I think we agree that permission, so we mentioned, it's fail. Well, what you're referring to is that there hasn't been a large coming on of permission institutional buyers or participants of these tokens, right? Securitize is a transfer agent license, right? They work a lot with BlackRock and have these big institutional funds. You also have Centrifuge, Ondo, Goldfinch, all these guys or whatever. Republic is another one, Reg CF for them. And what's the primary challenge? The primary challenge is that the adoption, the demand for KYC for buying tokens has fundamentally failed. That's the failure, right? So we either can do one of two things. We either can try to overwhelm supply and get as many assets on and try to attract them. But again, that still fails because apples to apples, if I still have a share versus a token, what can I do with the token? The token has to have inherent incentive, and that incentive is only corrected through DeFi and through public blockchains. So we have been actually working quite a bit with our members, and that's also part of the reason why we're doing T-Rex is to bridge RWA and DeFi. Some people call it RWA-fi. I think we have enough stupid acronyms, but that's okay. But ultimately, maintaining the part that needs to be compliant with the part that shouldn't be compliant and should be much more incentivized. You could do leverage trading, revert round trading, you could do indexing, all sorts of things, but that all happens on DeFi on permissionless. And I don't think that's going to change. I don't think we're going to see the advent of lots of permissioned. Well, now when I say permission, I mean, you get it on chain ID, you got a claim, you go to some, transfer agent or broker dealer and they KYC you. I think that's the past, honestly. So hopefully it gives you some hope. I got a little bit of hope. Okay. I got one more minute, one more question. Any questions for Joe Camarai? Okay, let's do it. I don't know if I can give a good answer.
Because you mentioned DeFi, and this is very interesting. So how do you envisage the forced transfer function not to screw up AMMs?
How do I envision the forced transfer not to screw up AMMs? By keeping the forced transfer nowhere near them. This is always what Joe Cam and I emphasize is we're not trying to get forced transfer into DeFi. It's not appropriate. That's not what it's needed for. It's really appropriate for what we call primary permission functionality, right? So where you put the security natively on chain, and that needs to have integrity of a ledger, but we're not looking to make a parallel DeFi ecosystem where everything's permissioned and you have all these ridiculous backdoors. That's not the way forward either. I think that's not. Any questions for Joe Chem? Okay, thank you guys so much. Appreciate you coming.